Okay, let's talk about prepping our fabrics for cutting and sewing. This is a very almost controversial subject in the sewing community. Or let's say that there are many opinions about this. There are a lot of people who will wash and dry all of their fabrics the moment they come from the store, no matter what they're making. Some other people do not wash it at all for anything. And then you have the ones that are like 50-50, like me. I only wash my fabric if I know that the final product will be washed and dry. So if I make a bag that I know is not going to be thrown in the washer and the dryer, then I don't wash the fabric beforehand. But if I'm making something that I know will be washed and dry, then I pre-wash and dry the fabric before I cut it and before I sew it. And so this week I'm working on a project that I will be showing you next week. And I decided to wash this fabric. And I'm glad I did because it actually shrunk. So I was glad that I washed it and I dried it. That way, it doesn't shrink after the fact. But in the process of washing and drying the fabric, when I got it out of the dryer, it was a mess. It was a tangled mess. And I wasted some fabric because there was so many threads and it was just a mess. So I went to social media and I asked if there was a better way to do this. And there were some great answers, great tips. So I'm going to share those with you in this video. Plus, I'm also going to show you how I fold my fabric after the fact so that it is on grain and so that I can square it up or trim off anything that, may be off grain. That way it is stored and ready to go. So when I place my pattern on my fabric, I know that my fabric is on grain. As always, if you have a question, a comment, if you want to let me know, do you wash your fabric or not? Let me know down in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And in case you don't know me, I'm Ali. And in this channel, I'm going to share sewing and embroidering tutorials, techniques, and pattern reviews so that you and I can make beautiful things together. So I picked 4 methods out of all the options I was given. So I got to work and I picked these fat quarters that I had and decided to give it a try. So the first one is this beautiful blue mint color fabric. I'm looking for the selvage, but I don't see it. This fabric does not have the selvage. And so for this method, I am going to cut the triangles in the corners. This method I have never heard of before, so I am very intrigued to see how it works. So she said that her grandma told her to cut along the corners for just a little triangle. So I did that. We'll see. For this cream color fabric, I'm going to test the pinking shears on this piece of fabric. And again, I'm just going to cut a little bit, not even a 1/4 inch, just enough along the edges of all 4 edges of this fabric. You can cut, single layers, or you can double it up and cut several layers. That way you save some time. Another suggestion was to put it on a lingerie mesh bag, the ones you buy from the dollar store or on Amazon, anywhere. So I'm just going to put this one inside the mesh bag. For the last one, I'm going to test doing a zigzag stitch all along the four sides of the fabric. This one was a very popular suggestion along with serger, but I don't have a serger machine. So they said, you know, you can do also a zigzag. So I am going to give that a try. Now the results. For the fabric that I stitched the zigzag around all four sides, as you can see, there was a little bit of fraying on one side of the fabric. It's actually a little bit of a mess, but only on one side. Still got tangled with other threads. The next one was the fabric that we put inside the lingerie bag, the mesh bag. And wow, it's frayed. It is all over. Look how much thread I wasted. I mean, it's not very good. It's not the best option. Of course, it didn't tangle with other fabrics because it was inside the mesh bag. But if it wasn't inside the mesh bag, it would have been tangled with everything else. And look at all this mess. Definitely not the best option. The next one we tested was the one cutting the corners. And I can tell you I was very pleasantly surprised with this technique. It only frayed a little bit, and if you can see on this side, but the rest of the fabric, you see, that's it. That was the only little bit that kind of fray a lot. It didn't tangle, it didn't get tangled with anything. This is all that was left. And the last test that I ran was using the pinking shears. And for this one, after I washed it, there was some fraying and some tangling, kind of like the same as when you did the zigzag. Same. I did lose some threads here, so as you can see, almost a 1/4 inch. Not all over, only on one side. But in general, it worked. I would say is the third best one. Consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel if you have learned something today. So next you're going to iron press your fabric using any tools you have. Make sure that your fabric is very flat and smooth. Now when you see, when I tried to fold it, it's not even. It has these bubbles, as I call them, along the fold. And I don't want that. That is not what we need. That tells me my fabric is off grain. So we shift or move the fabric around to make it even. Make sure that it matches along the selvage. Now that it is completely flat on the fold, we can trim it off as needed. Always making sure that it matches along the selvage lengthwise. So this is how much is off grain. And that's what we need to trim off or square off. Now don't worry if your fabric doesn't match along the cross grain or weft. That doesn't matter. What's important is that it matches along the length. And because we are going to square off or trim off that excess fabric along the cross grain. Now pin your fabric in place. And we're going to do the same on the other end of your fabric. Always making sure the selvages match. And that your fabric is flat. Pin it in place so that we make sure that it doesn't shift around. And here's how much my fabric was off grain. Now when I fold the fabric one more time, I want to make sure it's still flat and that there are no bubbles. Make sure your selvage and the folded edge match if you're folding it again. And now we're going to square off or trim off the uneven fabric. Make sure you catch every layer of fabric and that you find the shorter edge, and that's where you're going to cut. In this case, it was about 1 inch on both ends of my piece of fabric. Beautiful. Now my fabric is on grain, washed and dry, and I can fold it and store it away, and it's ready to be used. Now make sure you do the same with all the other pieces of fabrics that you have washed and prep for your projects. I'm doing this for the other ones that I will be making the kitchen towel toppers with. And now these pieces of fabrics are ready to be used for my next project. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know down in the comments which technique are you going to try. I would love to know that. And check out the next videos. Ciao.